Before 9/11, we had 200 applicants for every position. After 9/11, we had 2,500 applicants for every position.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You really see the patriotism start to, come out at that time. It's something I think to be proud of. But,
Agreed.
like with any organization, when you start bringing in troves of people, the culture changes. And so
Very much so.
What type of culture shift in the agency did you see?
Yeah. Call me old-fashioned, but, the original mission of the CIA was very clear and very simple. It was to recruit spies, to steal secrets, and then to analyze those secrets to provide the best analysis possible for policymakers to make policy. Simple as that. Mm-hmm. Immediately post 9/11, the CIA became a paramilitary organization, borrowing from special forces from every one of the branches of the military, setting up in-house, for lack of a better term, assassination squads. And with the power of a presidential executive order, sending these teams all around the world to either kill or kidnap people who had been deemed to pose what's called a clear and present danger to the United States, to American citizens, or American facilities. After that, we had a torture program, a secret prison program, a rendition program, an extraordinary rendition program, which is so patently illegal from any aspect. There's a big difference between rendition and extraordinary rendition that I think most people don't really have a feel for. So rendition is quite simple. Let's say you are Egyptian, right? And I catch you in Pakistan. And you don't have any plausible reason for being in Pakistan. And I send you back to Egypt. That's a rendition. Okay? Now, I know they're going to be rough on you in Egypt, but you're Egyptian. So, tough luck. An extraordinary rendition is you're Egyptian. I catch you in Pakistan. You have no plausible explanation for what you're doing there. And I send you to Algeria or Syria or Israel. And we say, don't tell anybody he's here. Soften him up a little bit, which is, the wink and the nod for a torture program. And then just give us a transcript of what he says when you're done with him. And nobody knows you're there. We disappear hundreds of people that way. No one ever has any idea, well, whatever happened to that guy, that Egyptian guy that we knew? He just disappeared one day. That's extraordinary rendition.
And so when you first went to Pakistan and you're heading counterterrorism in Pakistan, but then, you're on a mission to capture high-value targets, and at the time, this was part of the program. Mm-hmm. And so...
And I was a true believer in those early days. First of all, there was no torture program yet, right? 9/11 was an open criminal investigation. 3,000 Americans had been murdered. And so we wanted to bring these people to justice.
Do you think that the extraordinary renditions that were taking place, they did involve extracting information? Mm-hmm. It wasn't done under centralized American hands, let's say. And so do you think that the program became an attempt to centralize the information and streamline it through us?
In part, sure.
I've always heard that people would rather be captured under the Americans than captured under some of the other countries that we're aware of. So
absolutely, that's why.
Like you mentioned Syria, it's like people.
That's why all the Nazis came to the United States.
Yeah,
they were so afraid of the Soviets after the Second World War.
I'd love if you can elaborate a little bit on the experience of what started to change your perception of it. Was like we were changing. Like, what happened?
We changed. Boy, did we change. The torture program is what changed me. It flipped me very quickly for several reasons. One specific and one general. The the general reason I'll start with. We have a law in this country called the Federal Torture Act of 1946. And it specifically prohibits exactly the techniques that we used against Al-Qaeda prisoners. It's against the law. Can't do it. It's a felony. Okay? In 1946, under that law, we executed Japanese soldiers who had waterboarded American POWs. That was a death penalty charge. If you waterboarded someone, you got the death penalty. Fast forward to January of 1968. The Washington Post publishes a photograph on the front page of an American soldier waterboarding a North Vietnamese prisoner. The Secretary of Defense at the time, Robert McNamara, sees that picture, orders an investigation. The soldier is arrested. He's charged with torture, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years at hard labor at Leavenworth. But then, like magic, in 2002, it's all legal. Well, the law never changed. The law was never amended. We changed. And we just decided we don't like that law anymore. We're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. Number one. Number two, we captured Abu Zubaydah at the end of March 2002. We were able to narrow his possible location down to 13 separate sites. And so we decided to raid all 13 sites simultaneously. And sure enough, he was in one of the sites. He was in the one that we thought he was going to be in. I gave very specific orders that night to take him alive. And this idiot Pakistani policeman shot him 3 times with an AK-47. Abu Zubaydah and 2 others had climbed the roof of the safe house they were in, and they were jumping to the roof of the next door house to try to escape. And this policeman was just poof, shooting, poof, shooting again. He killed the first guy. The first guy was a bomb maker from Syria. Killed him dead before he hit the ground. Abu Zubaydah, he shot in the thigh, the groin, and the stomach with this AK-47. And Abu Zubaydah's bodyguard was shot in the leg. So it took about 6 weeks for him to recover enough to be interrogated. We send him to this secret prison. And normally the CIA always has jurisdiction overseas. The FBI always has jurisdiction domestically. But, as I said, 9/11 was an open criminal investigation. And so the FBI had the lead, even in the secret CIA prison. So the FBI assigns a translator named Ali Soufan, who's an ethnic Egyptian, great guy, skilled interrogator, to interrogate Abu Zubaydah. And Ali did exactly what the FBI has done since the Nuremberg trials in 1945 and 1946. He established a rapport with Abu Zubaydah, a relationship. It took several weeks. But what you do is you offer him a cup of tea, an orange, a cigarette, paper, and a pen so he can write to his mother. And you establish a level of trust. Finally, Abu Zubaydah began to open up and gave us actionable intelligence that saved American lives. There were 2 things in particular that Abu Zubaydah gave to Ali. We didn't know anything about the Al-Qaeda wiring diagram, for example. We knew bin Laden was the top, Ayman al-Zawahiri was the number 2, Mohammed Atef was number 3, but we killed him in Tora Bora in October of 2001. And then we just didn't know how the rest of the organization was structured. We just had no sources. So Abu Zubaydah explained the structure of Al-Qaeda to the point where, and I use this as an example all the time, Ali could ask, if you were going to do an operation in Dusseldorf, how would you do that? And Abu Zubaydah said, well, there's this guy, Mohammed. He's in Dusseldorf, and here's his address. And he has access to guns. And his cousin, Abdullah, this is his address. Abdullah has access to ammunition. And then there's a friend of theirs, Rashid. They met at the coffee house, and Rashid knows how to build bombs. So then we could go to the Germans and say, you have a serious problem in Dusseldorf, and this is who you need to be looking for. And then they can bust down the door and grab these guys, and now there's no Al-Qaeda cell in Dusseldorf. Number one. Number two, we didn't know who had planned 9/11. I mean, by all accounts, bin Laden wasn't that bright that he could come up with this on his own. And we knew that there was this very bad man out there going by the nom de guerre Mukhtar, right? Mukhtar was the mastermind of 9/11. We didn't know who he was. What we did know was that in 1996, somebody going by the name Mukhtar had planned something called the Bojinka operation. The Bojinka operation was a plan to hijack a dozen 747s from Manila Airport and to fly them into buildings all up and down the west coast of the United States. Mukhtar had gone out to lunch. He left his apartment and he went out to lunch, and a cleaning lady went into the apartment to clean it. And she sees these papers on a table. She said, "This looks like a terrorist attack." She calls the police. The police come and they say, "This looks like a terrorist attack. We're going to call the Filipino Intelligence Service." And then they come and say, "Oh, this looks like a terrorist attack. We better call the CIA." And the CIA wrapped it all up, and Mukhtar escaped. Abu Zubaydah thought that was hilarious. He said, "You don't know who Mukhtar is?" And Ali said, "No." And he said, "His name is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed." We had never heard that name before. So we do a name trace, and it's like, oh my God, he spent his senior year in high school in North Carolina. He graduated from North Carolina A&T. Like, how could this guy possibly have been radicalized? He's practically American. And then the hunt was on. And then 13 months later, we got him in a safe house in Rawalpindi. And we've had him ever since. That's what Abu Zubaydah did for us. Now, the rest of the story is quite terrible. It's that 9/11 was the worst intelligence failure in American history. The CIA had the blood of 3,000 innocent American civilians on its hand. And there was this deep desire for revenge. And so the CIA solicited from these two contract psychologists, James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, something that they called an enhanced interrogation program. I call it a torture program. They charged the CIA $108 million and said, "Here's your program. Why don't you let us fly out to the secret site, and we're gonna tenderize this guy, because you know he's withholding information on the next attack, right? He knows he's the number 3 in Al-Qaeda," which he was not. So Robert Mueller at the time was the FBI director. He knew exactly what this meant. And not only did he pull his personnel out of the secret site, Mueller ordered every FBI employee to leave the country where the secret site was located. He said, "I don't want to have anything to do with this. It's a torture program." And Mitchell and Jessen began to torture Abu Zubaydah mercilessly. So here was the great disconnect. The CIA and the FBI historically had hated each other so deeply that even their computer systems were incompatible. So Ali is debriefing Abu Zubaydah every day. He's writing up these brilliant debriefing cables, sending them to the FBI, and the FBI is not sharing them with anybody. So when a CIA cable is written, it normally goes to the CIA, to the White House, to the Defense Department, to NSA, and to the State Department, not to the FBI. Mitchell and Jessen begin to torture Abu Zubaydah on August the 2nd, 2002. And he immediately goes silent, just clams up. He can't believe this is happening to him. He told Ali Soufan everything he wanted to know. And now these strangers come and they're beating him and drowning him. And he actually had to be resuscitated once after a waterboarding session. His heart stopped beating. And they revived him so they could torture him more. He had mentioned that he had this irrational fear of cockroaches. So they built a coffin, put a diaper on him, put him in the coffin, put a box of cockroaches in with him all over his body, nailed the coffin shut, would open it once a day to change his diaper and give him food. And then they kept him in there for 2 weeks just to make him go insane. They made him play Russian roulette. They threatened to kill his mother. You know, they beat him until he had brain damage. None of this stuff was approved by the Justice Department. None of it was a part of the formal so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. But here's the real crime. They told us, we're starting the enhanced interrogation today. He went silent, as I said. But at headquarters, we didn't know what Ali Soufan was reporting back to the FBI. So they took Ali Soufan's cables, they retyped them in the CIA computer system and said, oh my gosh, look what he gave us. We waterboarded him one time. Somebody better call the Germans and tell him about Dusseldorf. And we need to look for this guy named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And at the CIA, people are like, holy shit, this actually works.
Yeah, so, you know, the belief was that Al-Mukhtar became known because of the enhanced interrogation. But what you're saying is that it was already through
that's the big lie.
Dialogue.
That's the big lie. And that lie was perpetuated in Hollywood with the dangerous movie Zero Dark 30, which the CIA actively contributed to. That's a whole other story. But Zero Dark 30 perpetuated the lie that the torture program led to bin Laden's location. And it was because of the torture program that we were able to find bin Laden and to kill him. That is just not true. Great analysis led to the location of bin Laden.
What a revelation. And then, you know, you have a moral and ethical problem with this.
Yes. I went back to headquarters from Pakistan in the summer of 2002, and I was approached by a senior officer in counterterrorism who asked if I wanted to be trained in these enhanced interrogation techniques. I'd never heard that term before. And I said, what's that mean? He goes, we're going to start getting rough with these guys. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he explained these techniques. I said, ooh, that sounds like a torture program to me. He said, it's not torture. The president approved it. And I said, I don't know, man. Let me think about it. So I went up to the 7th floor. There was a very, very senior officer there for whom I had worked in the Middle East 10 years earlier. I knocked on his door and I said, I need some advice. I said, they just asked me if I want to be trained in these enhanced interrogation techniques. What do you think of this? And he said, first, let's call a spade a spade. This is a torture program. They can use whatever euphemism they want, but this is a torture program. Secondly, torture is a slippery slope. And you know how these guys are. Somebody's going to go overboard. They're going to kill a prisoner. When that happens, there's going to be a congressional investigation, and then there's going to be a Justice Department investigation, and somebody's going to go to prison. You want to go to prison? I said, no, I don't want to go to prison. It turned out I was the only person who went to prison. But I went back downstairs. I said, this is a torture program. I have a moral and ethical problem with it. I think it's illegal, and I don't want any part of it. I was passed over for promotion. Mind you, I just caught Abu Zubaydah. I was passed over for promotion. And in my promotion panel, Kofor Black's successor said that I had displayed a shocking lack of commitment to counterterrorism. Those were the words he used to deny me a promotion. The man that I had gone upstairs to see overrode that rejection and promoted me. And then I went upstairs to be the deputy director's assistant. So anyway, we start getting these cables back that, oh, we waterboarded him one time. He gave us Muhtar. He gave us Dusseldorf. And I said, I said to a colleague, maybe I'm wrong about this. I still think it's reprehensible. But it looks like it's actually working. Well, it wasn't working. It was all a lie. It was all information stolen from Ali Soufan. So...
And you learned this later.
We learned it years later. The CIA internally learned it in 2005 when the Inspector General did an inspection, an investigation, and it wasn't made public until 2009 when it was finally declassified. 2009, 7 years after the fact, it was finally declassified.
John, I have a question about you mentioning that Abu Zubaydah was not Al Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
What does that matter?
Yeah,
because
that's a good question.
I always just wonder that because it's he was a logistics guy.
Yeah.
Essentially, every terrorist that was Al Qaeda and others needed this guy. It's so interesting to me as well that I just see this parallel between him and Carlos the Jackal. You have they're two spectrums.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's like two spectrums of a terrorist wheel. You have the leftist Carlos the Jackal. He's incredibly skilled at logistics, and then with Abu Zubaydah, it's the same thing. He was with a Syrian bomb maker, so he knew all these guys, and he was essential to the operational success of Al Qaeda.
Yes.
So, what does it matter if he's Al Qaeda or not?
At the time, it didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, even if we had known he was not the number 3 in Al Qaeda, he was still a very dangerous, very bad man, right? He was the logistics guy. He created the House of Martyrs, the Al Qaeda safe house in Peshawar, Pakistan. He founded the 2 training camps in Helmand and Kandahar provinces in southern Afghanistan. If you wanted to get into Afghanistan to fight the Americans, he would get you in. If you were tired of the fight and wanted to get out and go home, he would get you a fake passport and a plane ticket, and he would get you home. Bad guy. He had never joined Al Qaeda. He had never pledged fealty to Osama bin Laden, and he had literally nothing to do with 9/11. So, he's been in Guantanamo. He's been in American custody for 22 years. He's been in Guantanamo since 2007. If he was not a member of Al Qaeda, if he was not one of the masterminds of 9/11, then hasn't he served his time? I spoke to his attorney 2 months ago, and the attorney said that he was deeply involved in talks with the U.S. government to release Abu Zubaydah. He's never been charged with a crime. He's been incarcerated for, it's going to be 23 years in March. And the only sticking point was they were having trouble finding a country that would take him. We've resettled bona fide bad guys from Guantanamo all over the world. Everywhere from Switzerland to Albania to Fiji to Belize, they're all over the world. They're having a little bit of trouble finding some place for Abu Zubaydah. But now Donald Trump is going to be the president. And Donald Trump is on the record as saying that nobody will be released from Guantanamo, ever. So, I don't know where it stands. Is he just going to have to waste away there for another 4 years because Joe Biden couldn't get his act together? I don't know. I said to the attorney, too, would you do me a favor? And it sounds odd, I said, but would you tell him that I send my best regards? And he said, actually, I told him I was going to talk to you, and he sends his best regards. And he said to tell you 2 things. Number 1, he hopes that the 2 of you can have dinner together as free men. Number 2, he said, you really did give them hope in 2007, because when you went public about the torture program, a friendly guard at Guantanamo told them a CIA man went public about what happened to you. You may actually get out of this. And he said, for the first time, they actually had hope that the legal system would work the way it was supposed to work. Now, most of them have been released. There's something like 17 left at Guantanamo, down from 900 or something like that, almost all of whom were innocent of any crime. But Abu Zubaydah ought to be the next to be released, and I hope he is. He doesn't deserve to be held there.